Okay, so good evening, everybody. Good evening and Hanukkah Sameach. And I'm very glad to open the ceremony of awarding the Bezalel, Mordechai, and Nessia Narkiss Prize for Excellence in the Research of Jewish Art. I just counted, it's 34th time that the Center for Jewish Art awards this prize, and we congratulate Sharon Liberman Mintz in New York for receiving the prize this year. So as usual, we will start with Hanukkah candles, and today I don't remember when we had it last time.
Yes, I did.
All eight candles.
Yes, I did. Back by popular demand.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So we'll ask Irit Narkiss to lead the candle, to light the candles, and then we will switch to Sharon and her lecture.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קיימנו במצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר של חנוכה. אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהצענו במצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר של חנוכה. אמן.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah. Oh, it did succeeded. Oops, it fall. Oh, great. Irit, thank you very much. And now with Hanukkah candles in one window, we can switch to another window and to speak about Sharon Liberman Mintz. And I would like to share with you the document that we are going to send her by post.
Oh.
It will take several months, as you can expect, but I just got an express letter from Eastern Europe. It took only 3 months to get here. So maybe to New York it works a little bit faster. And we will also send you a book as a present, and we congratulate you a lot with this. And for those who doesn't know, Sharon Liberman Mintz is the curator of Jewish art at the Library of the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. And she specializes in the field of illuminated Hebrew manuscripts and rare printed books. And over the course of more than 30 years in the library, she had created dozens of exhibitions and authored tens of exhibition catalogs. And Sharon is also the senior consultant for Judaica at Sotheby's, also for 30 years already. And she authored and edited a large number of important publications. And Sharon's work on Hebrew laminated manuscripts, printed books, ritual and ceremonial objects, and many other topics in the field completely deserves the Narkiss Prize, the definition of which is, I quote, for excellence in the research of Jewish art. So, Sharon, as we say in Hebrew, Magia lach. And as far as I know, Sharon's most favorite topic among her many various investigations in in different fields of Jewish art is Megillot Esther. And I'm not sure, but it seems that her today lecture is also somehow connected to Esther Scrolls. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and the lecture, and this Sharon's lecture is titled Engraving the Sacred, the extraordinary collaboration of a Venetian rabbi and a Christian artist in 18th century Italy. So I stop sharing my screen. Sharon, the floor is yours and the screen is yours, and we are eager to listen to what you have to say about this fascinating topic.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is really exciting. Let me share my screen here. 1 second. This should work. Okay. It did work before. Rather, it's working now, so that's good. And give me 1 second to mhm. Voila. Okay. So, first of all, I'd like to thank the Narkiss family and the Center for Jewish Art for this wonderful honor. It is really hard to believe that I met Bezalel Narkiss over 40 years ago in 1983 as I sat in his graduate class on the art of medieval Hebrew manuscripts at the Institute for Fine Arts. And I was totally captivated by the artistry, the rich iconography of the magnificent manuscripts that he brought to our attention. And the class literally changed my life because I was planning to become a lawyer like my mother, but life took another turn, and it's been exciting. Then, just 40 years ago in 1985, having begun my studies at Columbia in medieval manuscripts, I attended the first international conference on Jewish art that Bezalel Narkiss organized with Aliza and the Center for Jewish Art, and the rest of history. The rest is really history, and it's been so exciting to have worked in this field and collaborated with so many of you over the years. The exhibitions that I co-curated, the publications that I co-authored, the research. No matter how little I slept over the years, it's always been fun. And I'd like to thank one person in particular who sat next to me in that very first class in 1983, Dr. Evelyn Cohn. We were both auditing the class, though Evie had her doctorate and was already advanced in the field. And she has mentored and encouraged me and so many others over the years, and we are all the richer for her guidance and wisdom. But she was there way back in the beginning. To begin, I'd like to set the stage on Venice and the Jews. The Jews and the Christians of Venice, although inhabiting the same small island, had to negotiate boundaries that attempted to separate them socially, physically, legally, and therefore the collaboration of a Jewish artist, which we're going to explore, collaboration of a Christian artist and a Jewish rabbi to produce artwork for the Jewish community represented an unusual dialogue. Although some individual Jews had passed through Venice in the Middle Ages, the authorized continuous residence of Jews in the city of Venice and the emergence of the Jewish community was a 16th century development not initially planned by the Venetian government. The charter issued in 1503 to Jewish moneylenders in mainland of Mestre permitted them to come to Venice in case of war, and consequently, in 1509, when the enemies of Venice overran the Venetian mainland, during the War of the League of Cambrai, Jewish moneylenders and other Jews residing in Mestre, as well as Padua and elsewhere, fled to Venice. The Venetian government soon realized that allowing them to stay was doubly beneficial, for they could provide the hard-pressed treasury with annual payments, while their money lending in the city itself was convenient for the needy urban poor. Consequently, in 1513, the government granted the Jews a charter permitting them to lend money in Venice, and then 2 years later, the Jews obtained permission to operate stores selling secondhand clothing and other used items such as household goods and furnishings, which were sought by a large part of the population, which prior to the Industrial Revolution, less expensive mass-produced items were not readily available, and the secondhand material was highly sought after. Many Venetians, especially the clerics, objected to the residence of Jews all over the city. So in 1516, the Senate decided as a compromise between the new freedom of Jewish residents all over the city and the previous state of exclusion to segregate the Jews. The Jews were not the only population that was segregated, but there were other different different populations, people from Turkey, people from that were also segregated. But at this point, all Jews residing in the city and those who were to come in the future were required to move to the island known as the Ghetto Nuovo, which was walled up and provided with 2 gates that were locked all night from 1 hour after sunset in the summer and 2 hours after sunset in the winter until dawn. At the beginning, Jews of Italian and German origin moved into the ghetto. The German Ashkenazi Jews came to Venice because of persecution in their communities, while the Italian Jews came from Rome and from the south, where they too faced opposition. Jews from the Ottoman Empire moved into the Ghetto Vecchio in 1541. And finally, the Spanish and Portuguese Jews came to Venice in the late 16th century, and they were the wealthiest and most influential Jewish community in the ghetto. The German, Italian, Ottoman Empire, Spanish, and Portuguese Jewish communities were independent yet lived side by side with one another. And the Venetian Jewish community flourished, building magnificent synagogues, commissioning splendid silver objects of Judaica, and crafting exquisite textiles. In 1516, Daniel Bomberg established the first Hebrew printing house in Venice, which grew to become arguably the most important Hebrew press in the 16th century. I'll note, and I'll come back to this, that in Venice, Jews were not allowed to open their own presses, so all Hebrew books were published at printing houses owned by Christians, but the presses for the Hebrew books were operated by the Jews. In the 17th century, we witness an interesting phenomenon. Hebrew texts, especially or specifically Ketubot and Megillot, created from members of the Jewish community, transition from being completely produced by hand, that is, both the writing and the art, to a new form of fabrication in which the creators of these handwritten documents and scrolls incorporate complex printed ornamentation while still maintaining the manuscript tradition of the text. And here we're looking at a ketubah a very glorious ketubah in the Brzezinski collection. It was created in Venice in 1648. It is a marriage contract with an engraved and then hand-colored border, but the text is handwritten, created for the wedding of David de Almeida and Donna Judita, a daughter of Daniel Valenson. And this couple was extraordinarily wealthy. The dowry here alone is 10,000 Venetian ducats. And in looking at this ketubah, you see densely packed imagery with signs of the zodiac, illustrations of Psalm 128, the lion on top representing the family emblem, the 4 seasons, the 5 senses. Shalom Sabar has written quite a bit on this ketubah, as well as all other ketubot. We're not going to look at this in detail because otherwise we won't get to the actual topic of this lecture. But there are 6 known copies of this ketubah with the same printed border, 6 known ketubah with the same printed border used for different weddings. And it's not the only printed engraved border we find on ketubot at that time. Here you see another ketubah, this one for a marriage in Mantua in 1689. This is in the JTS collection. It's an example of an engraved border. This one is not hand-colored, with a complex, sophisticated program of decoration, 27 biblical images, God shown in human form, complicated visual imagery, which you wouldn't expect to see on a ketubah, Lot and his daughters, Suzanne and the elders, David and Bathsheba, along with other scenes which you might expect. Again, Shalom Sabar has written an entire 28-page article on this ketubah. If you are in the New York tri-state area and would like to see it in person, until Tuesday evening, it is on display at the Grolier Club in a wonderful exhibition of treasures of the JTS library there. But the question arises, who created these documents for the Jewish community? Who printed them? When were they printed? Where were they printed? These are luxury objects, to be sure. We have some idea of the prospective audience. Anybody with a dowry of 10,000 ducats, it's obviously a wealthy group that is purchasing these documents. However, these very sophisticated documents, designs from the second half of the 17th century are unsigned, and we have no information regarding who decided to make them. We don't know if the artists were Jews or Christians. In some cases, we anticipate, particularly this ketubah, that it was a Christian, but clearly Jews are using them. We don't know who the printers were. We don't know who paid for or supported the endeavor. These are documents printed on parchment. Parchment is a very expensive material to print on. If you make mistakes, it's expensive waste. This is not the work of a neophyte, and yet we are still very much in the dark about their origin. One more example. At the very same time, we find a similar phenomena with multiple copies of 17th century Megillot that are profusely decorated and illustrated with engraved and then hand-colored borders. So the text is handwritten. In this particular ketubah, we believe it's dated around 1670, but with all this imagery, someone had clearly given a lot of thought to the design, and someone had invested a lot of capital into the production of this Esther scroll. Again, it's printed on parchment, but handwritten. At present, the whole production is a total mystery, and I'm hoping that maybe the next generation or my generation will figure it out. But that's not what we're going to look at today. Today, this is all to set the stage, because in the 18th century, we have a continuation of this phenomena where Hebrew books, documents, and scrolls incorporate printed design to embellish the handwritten texts. But in the 18th century, we have paratext, that is, information on the documents that's not exactly related to the topic of the document, but allows us insight into the creators. And from these bits of information, we can begin to tease out the collaboration of a Christian artist, Francesco Grisolini, with the leading rabbi in Venice at the time, Simcha, also known as Simone Calamani, as well as his son, Avraham Yirmiyah, or Abraham Jeremiah Calamani. And they together created art for the Jews of Italy and beyond. So let us take a closer look at this 18th century Esther scroll and some of the other things that they collaborated on. The art and history of decorated Esther scrolls is a subject deeply close to my heart, but it's a subject of another lecture. But in short, for our purposes, the earliest decorated Esther scrolls that we know of begin in Venice. It was created in Venice in 1564, but the art of illustrated Megillot only reaches full form in the early 17th century. And then by the 18th century, this genre is well established. We find a proliferation of decorated and illustrated Megillot throughout Europe, and then it moves to North Africa and other places. And what I'd point out is that whereas the text of Esther scrolls must be written by hand on parchment in order to be fit for ritual use on the holiday of Purim, the rabbis, for the most part, tacitly accepted the addition of ornamentation. And these illustrated scrolls were considered kosher and fit for ritual use and could be read both privately in the home and publicly in the synagogue to fulfill the obligation of reading the Megillah. And if for no other point this lecture is useful, I really want to do away once and for all with the idea that you cannot use illustrated scrolls in the synagogue. There is absolutely no construct where a scroll is kosher for use at home, but not kosher for use in the synagogue. Illustrated scrolls were dedicated to the synagogues. We know that from the wonderful exhibition in Rome that took place last year. And a scroll, if it's considered kosher with decoration, is kosher to be read both privately and publicly. Okay, I've been waiting a long time to say that publicly. In this scroll, the handwritten text is set within an engraved border. The design is composed of an arcade with arches surmounted by an elegant balustrade that supports urns overflowing with flowers. We have blank medallions in this scroll anyway. They're filled in other scrolls. Floral scroll work and a variety of birds, eagles, peacocks. Scenes from the Esther story are positioned beneath each of the 19 columns of text, and these were created as separate engraved blocks, and they were added to the parchment after the border was printed. This engraved border was popular in Italy in the mid-18th century, and we have at least 20 remaining copies of this engraved border. The border itself was also copied, but that's and closely copied, but that's also another lecture. This is a sophisticated, there is a sophisticated visual narrative unfolding in the lower border. And here we see in the background Haman discussing with his wife Zeresh and his friends what to do with the Jew Mordechai. And we see that in the background, tall gallows are built in order to hang Mordechai. And Haman then proceeds to go to tell Achashverosh of his plan. But in the meanwhile, on the left, we see Achashverosh is in bed. He is sleepless, and his book of Chronicles is being read to him. And he has discovered that Mordechai has never been rewarded for saving his life. And this is kind of a turning point in the narrative. And it's an enormous amount of information, visual information, to pack into an image that is 1 inch high by 2 inches wide, right? Think about what's going on there. In the next image, we see the triumph of Mordechai, and Haman is leading Mordechai through the streets of Shushan. And this image is especially interesting because you'll note a tiny detail top left. Someone is pouring a bucket of slop onto Haman's head. What is this about? This is not a detail that you will find in the Megillat Esther. This is an interesting reference. It is a midrash. The Megillah, the Bible, relates that Haman comes home chafui rosh, that his head is covered, but it doesn't explain what that is or why. Like, what does that mean? The rabbis explain that Haman's daughter looked out the window. As you see here, someone is looking out the window, saw someone on a horse, and someone leading the horse. She assumed that the man on the horse was her father, and the person leading the horse was her father's nemesis, Mordechai, and pours a bucket of slop onto the head of the person leading the horse, which turns out to be her father, Haman. So Haman arrives home, chafoi rosh, his head is covered in slop. So again, this is not just the Esther story is being chronicled here, but even midrashim, rabbinic details within the Esther story are placed within this narrative. Here we have an image of the second feast to which Esther has invited the king and Haman. And this is the point when Haman's plot is revealed by Esther to the king. What do we know about the artist who created these illustrations? Well, the scroll is composed of 3 to 4 sheets of parchment, 3 to 4 membranes. And at the bottom left of every sheet, as you see here, right, it's signed in the plate Grisolini F. Second. And this is none other than the artist Francesco Grisolini. And although the scrolls are not dated by the artist, several of these scrolls, which feature Grisolini's engraved borders, have been signed by the scribe who wrote the text in the sheet. And this same scribe also included the dates 1744 and 1746. So we know that the scroll was created approximately in the mid-1740s. Just who was this artist, Francesco Grisolini? It turns out that he was an unusually talented and accomplished individual. Francesco Grisolini was born in Venice in 1717 into a family of silk weavers and merchants, and later in life he achieved considerable repute as a scholar and a man of broad intellectual pursuits. And his interests ranged from natural sciences to cartography, to politics, to drama, to the arts. And here you see him peering out of a medallion in the 19th century Jacquard garden in the town of Schio near Vicenza. In his youth, Grisolini pursued and then abandoned an ecclesiastical career, and then he decided upon a career as an illustrator of books and maps. He became a cartographer. Maps were the main focus of his early activities. And at approximately the same time that he was creating the images to adorn the Megillat Esther that we have just seen, Grisolini was also working on a monumental map of the Holy Land, which has recently, I guess in the last decade, you could say, been rediscovered at the Carrera Museum of Venice. You wonder how you could not discover a map that's 4 feet high and 7 feet wide, but there it is. This is a hand-drawn map dated 1744, and it constitutes one of the most ambitious cartographic undertakings produced in Venice in the mid-18th century. Monumental in size as well as in conceptual scope, this work presents a richly articulated image of the Holy Land that brings together geography, history, biblical exegesis, and antiquarian learning. And it is a striking example of Enlightenment erudition in which scientific ambition, visual rhetoric, and historical synthesis are brought into careful balance. And again, we don't have time to really explore this map. There's a full article on it, but I'll just point out one small detail in the corner. Number one, if you can see some of the close-ups, there's a lot of Hebrew on this map. And here, Grisolini has drawn the rabbis. I believe Maimonides is there, Josephus Flavius. And I think this is Grisolini himself with his back turned towards us, pointing towards the map. He's really placed himself front and center as the creator of this map. A measure of Grisolini's success in the field of cartography is further witnessed some 18 years later in 1762, when he wins the very prestigious commission to restore the maps in the hall of the Scudo room, or the shield hall of the Doge's palace in Venice. And for this, he received a fee of 1,800 ducats, which was an enormous sum at the time. This is the largest room in the Doge's apartments, and it runs the entire width of this wing of the palace from the canal to the courtyard. This hall was used as a reception chamber, and its decoration with large geographical maps was designed to underline the glorious tradition that was at the very basis of Venetian power. The original versions of these maps were produced in the mid-16th century, and in 1762, they were restored by Francesco Grisolini. This commission was given to him by the powerful Doge Marco Foscarini. Grisolini wrote an essay on natural sciences. He authored several comedies that were commercially produced in the theaters. In 1746, along with 2 Englishmen, he establishes one of the earliest Freemason lodges in Italy. He is an editor of a scientific journal, influenced by Diderot and the encyclopedists. In 1768, he begins work on a dictionary of art and trades, which is a massive encyclopedic work of trades and industry. He doesn't get to finish it. It's continued later by Abbot Facidoni Mark. And in 1744, Grisolini leaves Venice. He's disappointed by the ruling class's lack of desire for economic reform. He embarks on a long journey to the region known as the Banat. Today it's Romania, then it was Hungary, and it's a province at the southern eastern extremity of the Habsburg Empire, and he spends 2.5 years there and writes the attempted political and national history of the Timisoara Banat, which is then published in 1780. In the last years of Grisolini's life, he suffers a debilitating mental illness and is confined to a hospital in Milan, where he dies in 1787. Judging by Grisolini's myriad publications, both scientific, historical, his theatrical productions, the extremely important commissions he receives for maps, it's apparent that he's firmly within the center of intellectual culture of the Venetian Enlightenment. At the same time, in the world of Jewish art, this boundlessly curious polymath is best known for the wonderful engravings that he created to adorn Hebrew books and scrolls. And between the 1730s and the 1760s, Grisolini produces several works for the Jewish community, including 4 frontispieces for a Hebrew Bible, published in 1739, numerous engravings for prayer books, an engraved wall decoration for Sukkah, and most notably, the illustrated border for the Esther scroll that we had just been looking at. Here we see 2 frontispieces that he created for a set of machzorim printed in Venice in 1750. At left, the frontispiece for the machzor for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, with an illustration of how Yom Kippur was celebrated in the temple, was celebrated in the tabernacle in the desert. And at left, you can see the Jews celebrating Passover in the foreground, Sukkot in the middle ground, walking around with lulav and etrogim on the left, and Moses receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai for the holiday of Shavuot in the background, and these both are signed by him in the plate. He also engraves another frontispiece for a chumash printed in Venice in 1755. This shows you an image of Moses on Mount Sinai, and he pays very careful attention to details. You'll note the fence, which is set up over here, and Moses is up on the mountain, and everybody is below. Joshua has accompanied him halfway up the mountain. And what I want to point out is the printer's emblem of the Foa family at the top of this page up here. And this is Gad Ben Samuel Foa at the Bragadini printing house at this point. The Foa family was an illustrious family in Venice. Among other things, they were involved in printing. And as noted earlier, the Jews were not allowed to own printing houses in Venice. So members of the Foa family worked with the Bragadin press to publish books for the Jewish community. And the ones we've seen are examples of that. Grisolini was clearly very talented, but how did he know what scenes to illustrate? Well, we have a clue from another earlier project that he undertook. And here you see the title and opening pages from a Hebrew Bible printed in Venice from 1739 to 1741. And this Bible features the elaborate printer's emblem of Isaac Foa, along with the names of many people who were involved in the publication, including, as you see here in red, Simcha Kalamani. And it notes that Simcha Kalamani provided a grammatical treatise, and he also provided the glosses in Italian that appear throughout the text. And you can see examples of that here. And they explain the challenging passages and words. But this Bible is especially famous for its 4 illustrated frontispieces that were engraved by none other than Francesco Grisolini. The first frontispiece, depicting the binding of Isaac, is particularly elaborate, and it's probably referencing Isaac Foa, who was behind the printing of this book, which is why so much attention was paid to the binding of Isaac as the one story from the Chumash shown here. 11 images illustrate this story, starting at top right with God's order to Abraham to take his only son, Isaac, and culminating with the large central image of the intervention of the angel who stops the actual sacrifice. And the engraving frontispiece is signed At left by Francesco Grisolini with the letters D and S. We'll get to that in a minute, following his name. And at right by Rabbi Simone Calamani with the letter I following his name. There are three other frontispieces in this Bible to the former prophets, the latter prophets, and the writings. They're less elaborate. They depict over here at right the former prophets, Joshua commanding the sun to stand still, while the prophet Samuel is anointing King David. And for writings at left, an image of King David kneeling before his harp. And we see a book here, Tehillim, and of course, King David is traditionally ascribed as the author of Tehillim, or at least most of the chapters of Tehillim. And even on the tiny Hebrew letters in the book, it reads Sefer Tehillim, and both of these are signed by Francesco Grisolini. Oops. And finally, the frontispiece for Nevi'im Achronim, we see images of Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah. And rather interestingly, we see a vision of Ezekiel's heavenly chariot. And this is surprising because according to Jewish tradition, even though two-dimensional art was permitted, one of the things that the rabbis expressly forbid for fear that one may come to worship is the servants of God. You are not supposed to depict images of the heavenly chariot or the servants of God. This is in the Talmud, Avodah Zarah 42 and Rosh Hashanah 24. However, it's here, and above that, again, we see the family emblem of the Foa family, the printers of this book. Whereas the first engraved frontispiece is signed by Francesco Grisolini and Rabbi Simone Calamani, the other illustrated frontispieces in this book are only signed by Francesco Grisolini. What do we know of what each man contributed to the project? We know by the initials following their name. So the D and the S refers to the Latin word for drawn by. D is drawn by. And S is for sculpted, engraved by. So it was drawn and engraved by Francesco Grisolini. And I stands for the Latin word for invented, meaning designed by. So what's going on here is Calamani designed it. He came up with the imagery, and Francesco Grisolini drew and engraved it. So these signatures reveal that Grisolini was working in partnership with another very interesting 18th century Venetian personality, Rabbi Simcha or Simone Calamani, who advised him on the design of his illustrations and then added his name to the engraving so we would know of his involvement. Well, who was Rabbi Simone Calamani? He was an 18th century Venetian rabbi author, equally prominent as a linguist, a poet, an orator, a Talmudist. During his rabbinate, Calamani was engaged as a corrector at the Hebrew Press in Venice. I neglected to mention he was born in 1699 and dies in 1784, so his life really spans a good portion of the 18th century. Calamani was the author of numerous works. At age 17, he has already published a volume of prayers for the Erev Rosh Chodesh, the new month, and other works include grammars, dramas, dictionaries, educational material. He's also the author of numerous poems. We have several of his poems in the library of the Jewish Theological Seminary. They are broadsides. I put this especially here for Avri because we're about to embark on a project to catalog and digitize all of the broadsides in the JTS library. This is a poem that celebrates the wedding of Yema, the daughter of Asher Castel Frank, and Jacob, the son of Samuel Consigli. And it was printed in Venice in 1750, and you can see here, signed by Simcha, the son of Abraham Calamani. He wrote, Calamani also authors poems celebrating the graduation of Jewish doctors from the medical school in Padua. He writes elegies. You were not considered literate if you couldn't pull off a poem for any one of number of occasions, and Simcha Calamani was nothing if not literate. We find kalamani also associated with decorated documents, even those that we might not think of as candidates for visual embellishment. This is a Shrita Kabbalah. It's a certificate granted to Samuel Luzzatto in 1774 that authorizes him to practice Shrita, ritual slaughter, and Samuel Luzzatto was a member of an illustrious Italian rabbinic family, and the Kabbalah, the certificate, contains two texts certifying Luzzatto both as a shochet and a bodek, an examiner. And centered above the two putti on top, let's see here, is the Luzzatto family coat of arms. And you see one of the putti holds a knife or a chalaf representing the office of the shochet, that's at left, and at right, the other one holds a pair of lungs, which represents Luzzatto's additional role as a bodek. He could examine the lungs. And the illustrations of many animals that he was permitted to slaughter surround the text. At right are depictions of the mammals. At left are a variety of carefully drawn fowl, and Shrita licenses were granted after the aspiring shochet had been examined by a rabbi on his knowledge and expertise in the laws and practice of ritual slaughter. And we know that Simcha Kalamani gave this to Samuel Luzzatto, but who initiated the elaborate artistic ornamentation of this certificate? We've seen other illustrated certificates for Shrita. There are not a lot of them, but this is by far the most elaborately illustrated. Did Rabbi Kalamani have help from Francesco Grisolini? We don't know. But there is one further piece that Grisolini collaborated on with a member of the Kalamani family. And that is a series of sukkah decorations, sukkah plaques, that were printed in Venice. They are undated, but appear to be from around the year 1760. And you will see here that this plaque is signed by two people. At left, we have the signature in Hebrew of Francesco Grisolini. He signs his name with the word Tzayar, that he is the painter. And at right, we have the name Avraham Yirmiyah Kalamani. This is the son of Simcha Kalamani. And he says that he is the person who chashav, he thought this up. He is literally the designer of this engraving. So there's a lot of complex imagery in this engraving. We see a central verse, which I'll discuss in a minute, surrounded by images of palm trees and an etrog tree. And on either side of the verse, we have Moses at left with rays of light, not horns, holding the Ten Commandments, and Aaron dressed in the clothing of a high priest. And the images, let's see, above the verses are really very interesting and complex. They relate to the dedication of the first temple, which took place on the holiday of Sukkot, as we find in the book of Melachim Aleph, Perek Chet, Kings 1, chapter 8. So the first image that you should look at is in the upper margin at center, and it talks about how the Kohanim, the priests, could not stand before the cloud of glory. And at right, you see Solomon dedicating the temple, standing before the altar, his arms upraised, and at left, Solomon blessing the nation. And in the corners, over here and over here, we find images of figures walking with the four species and an image of a sukkah. However, the image below is perhaps the most interesting. And this is an image of Simchat Beit HaSho'eva, which is literally the rejoicing at the place of the water drawing. It is a unique image that I find nowhere else in the history of Jewish art, and it documents the special celebration in the temple during Sukkot. And this celebration surrounded a service which was performed every morning during the Sukkot holiday. It's called Nisuch HaMayim, literally the pouring of the water, or the water libation ceremony. The water for libation was brought up from the pool of Siloam, Brechat HaShiloah, in the city of David, and carried up the Jerusalem Pilgrim Road to the temple. And according to the Talmud, Sukkot is a time of year in which God judges the world for rainfall, whether we will have abundant rainfall or not. And therefore, this ceremony invokes God's blessing for rain in its proper time. And as related in the Talmud, during this ceremony, members of the community danced and sang songs of praise to God. The dancers would carry lit torches that were accompanied by harps and lyres and cymbals and trumpets. And you see all of that here. One of the high points of the celebration is described in the Talmud in Tractate Sutta in 53. And it is taught as follows, that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the Nasi, rejoiced greatly at Simcha Beit HaShoeva. He would take 8 lighted torches and throw one while he caught another, and never did one touch the other. And then he stuck his thumbs into the earth, bowed and kissed the ground, and sprang upright. And this is an illustration of just that celebration. The 2 men involved in the creation of this engraving were clearly aware of this very interesting account of how Sukkot was celebrated at the time of the Second Temple. Over the past 2 decades, I have located 9 remaining copies of this sukkah decoration, and each one features a different engraved verse. This is very interesting. It's not like they made one border and then they hand copied a different text onto each one. Each text has an engraved text. Each broadside has an engraved text on it. The texts that ornament each engraving appear first to be an unusual choice of verses from the book of Psalms, Tehillim, chapter 76. This chapter has 13 verses in total, and we see top right, verse 1, Lam Natseach ben Ginot Mizmor Lasaf Shir, top bottom right, the 8th verse, Ata Nora Ata, Umi Amod Lefanecha, God, thou art terrible, who may stand in thy sight? Then top right, surely your wrath against men brings you praise, and the survivors of your wrath are restrained. That's the 11th chapter, a verse rather. And then finally, on this image, verse 12, make vows to the Lord your God, fulfill them, and let all the neighboring lands bring gifts to God, who is to be feared. And it took me a minute to figure out why on earth this chapter of Psalms was chosen. I mean, what is the reference to Sukkah here? But actually, in one of the yet undiscovered broadsides, there is the verse, or the verse in Psalms reads, Vayhi b'Salem Sukkot umona ato bat b'Sion. In Salem there is set his tabernacle and his dwelling place in Zion. So that is one of the verses in this chapter of Psalms. It references a sukkah, and therefore they chose this particular chapter of Psalms to illustrate this sukkah engraving. And there are others as part of this series. I'm not going to show you all of them. The engraved sukkah plaques comprise a complex series of illustrations with a biblical reference to the holiday of Sukkot. It is the last so far in a group of really interesting artworks that attest to a remarkable collaboration between the members of the Jewish and the Christian community in Venice. At this point, it's important to pause for a minute and ask how such collaborations were made materially possible. Intellectual affinity alone was not enough. The bridge between Jewish textual culture and Christian visual expertise was often the printing house itself. In Venice, printers such as Isaac Foa and occupied a crucial mediating position, operating Jewish presses within Christian publishing houses while working closely with Christian engravers, designers, and craftsmen. The Foa family, and Isaac Foa specifically, were not merely printers, but they were facilitators of collaboration. Isaac understood both the demands of Jewish tradition and the possibilities of Venetian visual culture, and it is within this practical, commercial, and artisanal framework that the collaborations between Grisolini and Calamani take on their full meaning, grounded not only in shared learning, but in the realities of production. In the collaboration between Francesco Grisolini and Rabbi Simcha Calamani, as well as his son, Rabbi Avraham Calamani, we find a remarkably productive moment of intellectual collaboration. Grisolini, a Christian polymath of the Venetian Enlightenment, brought to Jewish visual culture the tools of engraving, cartography, and emblematic design, while Rabbi Simcha Calamani and later his son Abraham supplied the deep textual knowledge that made these images intelligible within Jewish tradition. Their partnership unfolded over decades across multiple media and left its traces in signatures, initial, and shared authorship that allow us unusually to reconstruct the process of collaboration itself. At a time when Jews and Christians in Venice were often segregated, the works that these individuals produced together, Esther scrolls, Bible frontispieces, liturgical books, sukkah decorations, they stand as material witnesses to a dialogue grounded in scholarly exchange and shared aesthetic ambition. Seen in this light, the Grisolini-Calamani collaboration is a compelling case study in how Enlightenment culture, religious learning, and artisanal practice could converge to create works that were at once deeply Jewish and unmistakably Venetian in their moment. And as this sukkah plaque indicates, thank you all for coming to this lecture.
Sharon, thank you very much for such an illuminating lecture. And I'm sure that many people would like to ask questions here. So we open floor for questions and comments. Please raise your hand. Meantime, until people feel, I hope that I see. Yeah. Meantime, until people think about questions, I have a small question. Am I right that on the map, Grisolini's map, there were also inscriptions in Arabic?
Yeah, well, yes, a few. That's correct.
And do
In
we
Latin
know
and Arabic and Hebrew, that's correct.
Hebrew, Arabic, Hebrew, Greek? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So probably Greek he knew by himself, but who helped him to write Arabic?
I don't know.
Maybe.
He is a subject of a lot of discussion, and was such a polymath. It's not entirely clear to us. Like, oh, I haven't, like nobody's gotten down to the depths of all of his connections. Some people write on his Freemasonry, and some people wrote on the map. It needs a little bit more research, I think.
Yeah, because maybe there is some similar collaboration with somebody Arabic speaking or Muslim people. It would be interesting to compare this. Yeah,
It absolutely would. To come.
yeah. Other questions?
I have a question. I don't know how to raise my hand.
Yeah, please.
Hi, Sharon. Thank you so
Hey.
much. Really, really illuminating. When you were discussing the sukkah decorations at the end,
Mhm.
it sounded to me as if you said that it was not just one single frame, but as the four examples that you put on there, I looked and it seemed like they were all the same frame, different psukim in the central.
Ah,
Did I
thank you for allowing me to
misunderstand?
elaborate on that. Okay, so it's the same frame, and then different psukim are either stenciled or engraved on. What's interesting is this is an engraved document. You would anticipate that there would be more than one copy floating around of these documents. From what I think, there seemed to have been one set left, which then got split up and found its way to a bunch of different collections in the 60s or the 70s. So they were in private collections. They came up for auction. They were bought by collectors in the 70s and the 80s. It's like it's one set. I don't have a duplication of any one of the psukim. Um, it's just who knows. And they've
Is it
come down in different conditions in different stages of hand coloring. So it's still a little bit of a puzzle.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Maybe more will be discovered when Avery does his broadside project. It's to be hoped.
Other questions, please?
Yes, I have a question. I also don't know how to raise my hand, so you will
Please don't
excuse
raise
me.
hand. Go ahead, sure.
Um, is there any research about any continuation of such collaborations? I mean, is there a continuity? Is it something that happened after? Is it the first one? That's what I'm wondering.
That is a good question. Let's think
Thank
about
you.
that. There's a kind of a parallel phenomena going on in Amsterdam where you have Shalom de Italia, who comes from Italy and brings his knowledge of engraving with him and sets up shop in Amsterdam and engraves Megillot and Ketubot in Amsterdam in the first half of the 18th century. We don't have a lot of detail about who's printing his works. Um, it was likely the Jewish presses in Amsterdam, I should say, not the Christian presses, because they were sophisticated Jewish presses in Amsterdam at the time, and the Jews could own their own presses there. Um, Other collaborations. I think I'd have to ask Shalom Zabar if he's on to answer that, actually.
Thank you.
It's
It was a very interesting talk.
it's nothing is quite as fulsome as the ongoing decades-long collaboration between this Christian artist and Jewish scholars. I can't think of anything else that's quite like that. I mean, maybe I don't. Does anybody else on this call know of anything where we have in the early modern period this kind of collaboration? There you go. This is an august bunch, so apparently not. But yes, okay. Uh, Other questions?
Yeah, there is Mr. Kidwell Gilbert raised hand, so please. Yeah.
Go ahead, Michelle. If you're welcome to speak, I see you have a hand raised. Maybe you didn't mean to raise your hand. But yeah, you have to unmute yourself. You're muted.
Yeah, please.
Mute. Okay. I have a question. It was a wonderful lecture. And I say this having been involved in the Italian illuminations of the Robert Weedman collection. Who are the major scholars in the field of Venetian manuscripts? I think of Morello Levi d'Ancona for general knowledge of Italian Renaissance manuscripts.
Well, I mean, there are a number of.
Well, would you tell me? Because I'd like to follow up.
Sure. You know what? Let's talk offline. There's I'm afraid to start listing people. I'll leave people out.
All right,
But
I'll send you my email.
offline, I'll
Thank
give
you.
you all the information
Yeah.
you need. Happy to help. It's fun that part of what I do as curator of Jewish art at JTS Library is field reference questions from around the world, and this is just exactly one of them. But it's nice to have people. It's nice to gather everybody together. This was a fun endeavor, and if there aren't more questions, I'm going to start making latkes for my family party tonight and sufganiyot. You guys can go back.
We've been invited. We will not succeed to get to New York tonight, but it would be great. So Sharon, thank you very much. It's a great lecture, and great mazel tov for the Narkiss Prize. And thank you everybody for coming. And I hope that we will meet next year at the 100 years anniversary of Bezalel Narkiss.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So thank you, and Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, everybody.
Chag Sameach.
Chanukah
Thank you.
Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach.